Sometimes when people are working in the darkroom, especially when they're just starting out, they want to make a test strip to figure out the exposure on the paper that they're printing. So they've got everything set up in the enlarger. They're making an exposure, and they do a test strip to figure out what's the best exposure for that print. Let me show you two ways to do it. I'm going to show you the best way to do it, and then I'm going to show you a better way to do it, if that makes sense. My name is Rob Skeoch. I'm a career photographer. I shot black and white for years, and then I switched to digital. I worked for Sony North America as one of the national managers. Now I've gone back to shooting film, and I'm just trying to pass on some of my experience, which is not always the best and correct way to do it. It's just how I do it, so it's flawed. But anyways, this is how I do things. Let's do a test strip. So let's imagine we're in the darkroom, we've got our enlarger, and we're projecting our image down to the easel right here. Now, we're going to switch to the darkroom in a second, but the darkroom is dark. It's got a red light, but in the darkroom, I'm using ISO 50,000 on my video camera, so the quality falls off quickly. So I'm going to try to show you in the light, imaginary, and then we'll go into the darkroom. So if you've got your enlarger projecting down the easel, now what I would do is I would use either 2 seconds or 3 second exposures to set up the darkroom. And what you're going to do is you're going to make one exposure, say it's 3 seconds. Then what you're going to do is you're going to cover up that exposure. So this underneath here is 3 seconds, but it's not getting any more light. I hit another 3 seconds, then I move the step over. Another 3 seconds, and I move the step over. Another 3 seconds, and I move the step over. Another 3 seconds, and I move the step over. And I'll get a series of steps along my picture. Now, it's beneficial when you do it to do it so that if there's different areas of the image, for instance, this image has some snow on the ground and then the shingles of the old house. So I do the step so that I've got the snow in the step and as well as the shingles, because I'm going to have to burn in that snow a little bit. So as you can see here, I'm doing it in the darkroom again, 3 second steps. Now you could do 2 seconds. Sometimes if I know my exposure is going to be, I don't know, 10 seconds say, I might do 5 seconds on everything and then start a 2 second wedge. So I've got 5 seconds is the minimal, and then 7, 9, and 11. And how close are you going to get? Well, if you do 3 second steps, the closest you're going to get is within 3 seconds. Now, if you were way off on your exposure, you don't know what you're doing, you're all over the place, 3 seconds gives you a great starting point. If you're really, really close, though, maybe you're going to have to make a print and then look at the whole thing. So the step's not really as helpful. But the best way to do it is to use this card. This is just matte board. It would be better if it was black. I don't actually use this technique very often, so I didn't actually have a black matte board. I've got this old white, it's the middle of a mat. I do my 3 seconds, I do the wedge, I process it normally, so that would be, with this resin-coated paper, that would be 1 minute, stop, fix. And what you're trying to get is an image that has some exposure too light, some exposure too dark, and somewhere in the middle is going to be a great exposure, and that's where you're kind of working towards. And as I mentioned, you're going to want to have some of the snow in the picture, in each wedge, and you're going to want to have the boards in each wedge, because let's say you're going to do 10 seconds for the boards, but you can also tell from here that, oh, I need 14 seconds on the snow. So as long as you kind of have both parts in each wedge, you can figure it out easily. Now, the other thing to look at is at the very bottom. So when you look at the wedges in the final, you'll notice that some of this, there's a black rebate along the bottom. That's just film plus base fog. And at 3 seconds, you can see it's gray, and at 6 seconds, it's also just darker gray, and it doesn't really get to be really totally black until about 10, 12, 15 seconds, somewhere in there. So it's a little bit of a step wedge along the bottom, and that's a good indicator, because you should be getting blacks in your print around the same time you're getting total black in the rebate. So that just showing that, I would obviously crop this out if I was making a real print, but I just wanted to show that to you, that the film plus base fog, which I happen to have along the bottom here, it just shows you very easily that you're getting maximum black, and that's going to be something that you want to have. Okay, so now I've made my test strip, my exposures, and I've run it through the developer. So you can see on the far right, that was the 3-second exposure. It's obviously too light, and the rebate on the bottom, as I mentioned, is just a light gray. And then 6 seconds, still obviously too light. And then 9 seconds, well, it's kind of starting to show like an image. 12 seconds seems to be a pretty good point. I think I would probably use 12 seconds. And 15 seconds, maybe that's too dark. And again, the base, the film rebate on the bottom, that black bar, that is already totally black at 12 seconds. So 15 seconds, 18 seconds, it's not getting any blacker. But, from this test strip, I would say 12 seconds will give me a good place to start. And the other thing that I would do is, as I look at the snow, I realize that 12 seconds isn't going to be enough. So I'm going to go 12 seconds on the base exposure, and I'm going to add 6 seconds to the snow. So I'm going to burn this in for 6 seconds along the snow line. So now I'm over onto the wet side of the darkroom, and I'm into the developer. As I mentioned, it's multi-grade developer. You mix that 1 to 9. I need 1 minute in the developer. Would I always use multi-grade developer? No, I'm actually trying to use this up. I'm going to switch to a powder developer, but in this case, I had Ilford multi-grade developer, 1 minute. Then I was going about 30 seconds in the stop bath, and then into the fix. And the fix is, again, about a minute. If I was doing, that's with resin-coated paper. If I was doing a fiber-based paper, the exposure or the time in the developer would be 3 minutes, and then a little bit longer in the fix and a little bit longer in the stop bath. So that gives you an idea of the darkroom. It is dark. Sorry about the quality. It's ISO 50,000. So this print here, this gives you an idea of what it looks like with a 12-second exposure and another burn of 6 seconds on the snow part. No burning on those kind of shingles at all. So just 12 seconds and then 6 additional seconds on the snow, which is kind of what I got from the step wedge test. Now, what I realized after I made this print was I didn't burn the snow in enough. So I did it for 6 seconds. I redid it this time for 12 seconds. So I've done it for 6, wasn't enough. Then I switched to 12. 12 seems to give me a little bit of detail in the snow, and certainly it's a close enough picture to be, useful. This is certainly a good starting point. You might burn and dodge a bit more, but I'm trying to show you how to make a test strip, not really how to show you how to make a master print. And you'll notice on this print, along that bottom line, that rebate black border line, which normally would be cropped out, but I just show you that seems to be total blackness, which is what it should be. So that's how you do a exposure test, a test strip, while printing in the darkroom. 3 seconds seems to be a good starting point for each wedge. Now, that's the best way to do it. That's the best way that I know how to do it. But there's a better way to do it, and the better way to do it is notes. So this print, I made this print before I did the test strip. I made this print because I know that the enlarger at this height generally gives me a print of 12 seconds. So reconfirmed by using the test strip, 12 seconds seemed to be right there too. But before I did the test strip, I just put the negative in the enlarger and made a print at 12 seconds. Because my negatives are consistent, which is kind of the goal, at 12 seconds, I was right in the ballpark right away. So yes, it's great to do a test strip, but you know what's greater? You know what's easier? Keeping notes being consistent, you'll be able to just go right to your print. I learned more, I think, from making this first print at 12 seconds than I was able to learn from using the test strip method. So people love the test strip method. I understand it. If your negatives are all over the place, or you've never printed at this height before, or it's a new paper, blah, blah, new developer, all these different things change, yeah, maybe that'll get you in the ballpark. But once you're kind of, eliminating the mistakes and narrowing down your choices, you'll find that, hey, if an 8x10 was 12 seconds last time and my negatives are consistent, maybe 12 seconds is as good a place to start as making a test strip. I'm just saying. Anyways, it's great to be in the darkroom. It's great to be printing. This is on Ilford resin-coated multigrade paper. And this was about grade 2.5.